Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Whitfield Wildlife Conservation Area. My name is Allison Martin, and today we're going to talk all about trees and important parts and function of trees and how to track different plants and animals over time, talking about seasons, months, and even years. So what you're going to need today is a piece of paper and a pencil. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to grab a piece of paper and a pencil, and we're going to talk about different parts of a tree. And the tree that we're going to look at is this one here right behind me. Now it's important to know that this is a riparian habitat. So here at Whitfield, all of the trees that we're going to talk about today are in the riparian habitat. Well, what is a riparian habitat? A riparian habitat is a habitat that's near water. So all of these trees need water. Now in New Mexico, we know we don't have a lot of water coming from the sky. We don't have a lot of rainfall. So it's important to know where the groundwater level is. And that's very important when you're talking about the riparian habitat. The riparian habitat has groundwater that's only about 1 foot all the way up to maybe 8 or 9 feet. And anything lower than that, you're going to get in an upland habitat, and you'll have different plants and animals. So we need a water source to have a riparian habitat. The water source that we have here is the Rio Grande, and you might know where that is from your location. From us here at Whitfield, it's only about half a mile that way. So everything is close to the water, which means the water here is about 5 feet below my feet. And this tree in particular can only survive in a riparian habitat. So now let's look at this tree close up. So looking up closer at this tree, I have the leaves pulled up here. Now the leaves are just starting to change color because we're in November, and this is something that all deciduous trees do. A deciduous tree is a tree that loses its leaves and then regains them again in the spring when it gets warm. So we know that it has something to do with the temperature. But before we get there, we need to talk about the function of the leaf. So each of the leaves in the deciduous trees go through something called photosynthesis. You may have heard this term before. You need 3 parts of photosynthesis for it to work. The first one is the sun. The sun plays a major role. You need to have the sunlight enter in through the leaves to nourish the tree. Then you also need air, so you need oxygen. And very important, you need water. And all three of those things help bring nutrients to the tree. So with photosynthesis, you have these leaves that are changing colors. And they're changing colors because they're losing their pigment. That pigment is usually a green color in the summertime, and it's called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll gives deciduous trees a green color. That green color helps make photosynthesis work. Now trees use photosynthesis to feed themselves, which means they are something called a producer. So we are consumers, meaning we need to consume our calories to eat. A tree like this tree and other plants, they produce their own food. So they're called producers. They make their own food, which is what photosynthesis is. So what happens when the temperature starts to cool down is these leaves start to change colors from a yellow to a brown, and they eventually fall off the tree. So it's a way for the tree to save energy. So what's happening as the temperatures are cooling down is the chlorophyll is not working as properly because we don't have that nice green color as the temperature drops. And the tree is trying to save energy. So the leaves will fall off onto the ground and become brown and eventually start to decompose. And so we have decomposers, which also add nutrients to our soil, which makes our soil healthier and more diverse. So we want healthy soil for healthy plants. So one important thing to do is to remember to not pick up your leaves because they add that diversity to the soil as they start to break down. So we need chlorophyll, we need photosynthesis, very important for a tree, but also so are the branches. You can see that this tree has many branches, which tells me that this is a fairly young tree. It's very healthy, it's holding onto its leaves well before they're falling off. It's looking very good. So we have a very healthy, medium-sized tree with a lot of branches. And if we go in closer, we have the trunk of the tree. Now, the trunk of the tree is very important because that actually helps to bring water up and down the tree. So remember, the water enters in through the leaves, goes down through the branches, and down through the trunk, and eventually into the roots. And so the trunk actually helps bring water up and down the tree for photosynthesis to work. It also has a nice hard layer on the outside which protects the tree from certain animals that may want to come and eat the bark. So it helps protect them from animals, but also from an event like a lightning storm to help the tree survive if lightning accidentally strikes the tree. So we have this very, very thick bark on the trunk that helps protect the tree. So one of the last important things we haven't mentioned about a tree are the roots. Very important to hold the tree in place, but also to soak up nutrients for the tree to survive. Now the roots are very important, especially in a tree like this that lives in the riparian habitat, because those roots need to be in water all the time to move that water up and down the tree, even throughout the winter time. So we know the groundwater is about 5 or 6 feet below the surface here, which means these roots go down about 5 to 6 feet to tap into that water. So this tree is getting its nutrients from the water as well as from the soil to help it grow really, really big. Does anybody know what type of tree this is? Yes, I bet many of you know because you've seen these trees all over, especially if you live in a riparian habitat. This is a cottonwood tree. This is a medium-sized cottonwood tree, and they usually live to be about 80 to 100 years old. And you can see large cottonwood trees the closer to the river that you get. Now we have many different types of trees here at Whitfield, and I'm going to show you some of those trees that are really close to where we're at right here. So from me, over here to the right, it's hard to see because all of these leaves have mostly fallen off. We have a couple that are still on the plant. This is a New Mexico olive. This is another riparian habitat tree, and I can tell that it's a New Mexico olive because I can still see some really small of the olives that are still on there from last season. Now you can tell that most of these leaves have fallen off. So that also tells you that different deciduous trees will drop their leaves at different times throughout the changing seasons. And the New Mexico olive are one of the trees that drop their leaves first. And you can find a lot of their leaves here on the ground this time of year. Now, if we go just a little bit further over here, we have a very large tree, and this is a willow. Willows like growing in the riparian habitat, but because they don't need a lot of water, groundwater specifically, they can actually grow in an upland habitat as well. And you can tell that this tree is very healthy and doing very well, and probably an older tree, and probably even older than our cottonwood tree here. Some other trees that we have are going to be trees like the screwbean mesquite, and we also have invasive trees like the Siberian elm. And so not only do we have trees that are native to this area, but we have trees that are not native to this area. And sometimes invasive species can actually take over an area, and some of the native species are not able to grow. So that's one of the problems that we're noticing here in the riparian habitat along the Middle Rio Grande area. Okay, so for our next part, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how to track data over time. And one of the most fun trees to track are the cottonwood trees, and we're going to learn about why that is. See you in a minute. Okay, so now that we looked at some of the trees in Whitfield, I wanted to show everybody our largest cottonwood tree. So you can see a lot of those differences that I talked about earlier. Number one is going to be the size of the tree. Number two is going to be the amount of branches. You'll see a lot less branches on this tree than on the other tree. And obviously the size of the trunk. So you'll notice the trunk is a lot larger than the trunk of the other tree, but not just the size of it. Also, you'll notice when you look closely that it's breaking off and it's deteriorating. And this is the slow process of a tree dying naturally in the wild. Now, I'd like to ask you this question. How old do you think that this large cottonwood tree is? I'm gonna say that you may be thinking anywhere from 50 years to maybe 1,000 years. Well, we know cottonwood trees grow really quickly. So this tree is actually going to be only about 80 years old, which is really old for a cottonwood tree. If you head down near the Rio Grande, you'll notice a lot of the cottonwood trees are large like this one. And you could probably make an educated guess to think that all of those trees are beginning to slowly die, and they'll all die around the same time. So it's really important that we have new growth of cottonwood trees in the riparian habitat for them to survive in nature. So we talked a lot about how to track data over time, and I wanted to introduce you to one of my favorite things, which is called Nature's Notebook. Nature's Notebook is an app that allows you to track data over time. And in Nature's Notebook, you can track many different things with many different trees and plants and animals. I like to choose plants because they stay still. Animals are harder to track over time. So something really fun to do is to track a certain species of tree. This is what I've made for us here at Whitfield. Here I have 3 different trees that I track at Whitfield. And cottonwood tree 1 is going to be the tree that is behind me here. And so something that you could do at home is to download Nature's Notebook app and start tracking your own trees in your own backyards or at your school. So now I'm going to talk about some of the things that I like to track that I think are things that you can track either weekly, monthly, or even seasonally. So some of the things that I would track would be the leaves. I would track the leaves and track the changes of color of the leaves. Since I know this is a deciduous tree, I would track month by month whether the trees are yellow like this, or whether they're green, or whether they're brown and they've fallen on the ground. So we can see year to year when the trees start to change colors and when those leaves start to fall onto the ground. So one of the things that happens is when we get wind, the wind can actually help drop the leaves onto the ground. So you can hear we have a little bit of wind right now. So something else that's really neat to track with cottonwood trees, other than the leaves and the changes of the leaves, are when it's spring and you start to see the leaves start to bud and the seeds start to develop. So we have different cottonwood trees. We have males and females. The female cottonwood trees are the ones that actually produce the cotton, which fly in the wind to create new cottonwood trees. The males will produce something called a catkin, and the catkins will actually pollinate the seeds, and then that would create the cotton that flies and creates more cottonwood trees. So if you're looking at cottonwood trees in the springtime, when you begin to track them, you'll really notice the difference between male or female when you start to see the leaves come back. So we learned a lot today. We learned about phenology and tracking trees and plants and animals over time. We learned about the different parts of a tree, and we looked at a lot of different types of trees in the riparian habitat. So what I would like all of you to do is get a blank piece of paper and head outside of your own backyard. And I'd like you to find the nearest tree to you. And what you're going to do is you're going to track that tree in what you see. So you're going to do something called nature journaling. You're going to draw what you see right now. And you need to make sure that you label the date, the time, and the different parts of the tree that we learned today. And when you're done with all that, I'd like you to write down 3 questions of things that you think you could track over time to look for changes in that tree from season to season and year to year. And believe it or not, that data that a lot of students collect is actually used by scientists all around the world. And you can start adding to this data today in Nature's Notebook or on your own at home every day. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope that you're connecting with nature in many different ways, and I can't wait to catch up with you soon. Bye!